Draft physics video. Yeah, mostly Ken Wheeler responsing, probably discussion about light and the double slit experiment, which he brought up in a couple of videos. He's made a string of videos on the subject of light, and they're all really horrible. So I'll play some of this one. So it's just all his ether theory, and he uses all this strangled language to say simple things. That, there's movement over here, there's the medium, ether, which fills space. And so when he says counter space, that means where the ether is under pressure, let's say, or it's thick, or thicker ether. But the ether is the basic medium. So something moves, it vibrates through the ether like a water wave, gets to the other side, okay, and goes back to regular movement of something, apparently. But nothing's a something because everything's just vibrating ether, technically. So the whole universe it's like a string theory thing. The whole, the rope theory, or everything's connected by strings. So it's the God of the gaps. Instead of coming up with a real explanation, they just say the ether done it. Like bent space answers gravity in a God of the gap kind of way. Just put the cause somewhere where I don't have to think about it, where I can't touch it, see it, play with it, do anything with it, so I don't have to worry about it. God did it. Bent space did it. Ether did it. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway. So he's so arrogant. So Maxwell couldn't prove the ether. Steinmetz couldn't. All these guys in the past were all ether believers. And they wanted it to be true, but they couldn't make any... They couldn't make the argument. And they conceded they couldn't make the argument. And the irony is that the guy he calls this buffoon and this knuckle-dragging moron and this fraud and this fake and this horrible person, Einstein, has created the biggest and the most endorsed by physics ether ever, bent space. Bent space is essentially saying ether. What else is it saying? You can't bend nothing, so obviously it has to be a something that's being bent. The ether. And he's complaining. The whole wave-particle duality. Well, in 90% of the cases, it seems almost, particle is a meaningless word to physics, because they'll use words like antiparticle to describe a hole in the ether. Yeah. And he's complaining. It's just so ironic that he will insult them so aggressively when they are rolling so directly into a definition of physics that is completely God of the gap. Let's blame some other thing for the event because we don't want to bother doing physical explanations. Anyway, so some idiot left a comment on a previous Ken Wheeler video, I guess. So I might as well read that since I'm on the subject. What about the video of the large magnet twisting the grid B pattern on the cart screen? Yeah, I explain that. A cart screen is, they take 300-400 watts of electricity to run a TV in the old days. And what was all that energy being used for, mostly? Oh, that's right, creating a high voltage current to move the electrons and to bend them with a big giant magnet. And, stuff you don't have to do anymore. And so you don't understand how mixing a magnet with other magnetism is going to change the direction in which the electron lands or gets bent? You don't see how that's going to happen based on those field lines? Oh, come on. Doesn't that show a twisting vortex? No, it shows that the image you see on the TV isn't a image. It's a shadow image produced by a single trace that goes up and down the screen. So you can only bend the electron when it's heading for each location on the screen. So there's no twisting, it's just an illusion of the decay rate of the brightness on the screen. It isn't moving. Einstein. Anyway, doesn't that show the twisting vortex or whatever he calls it? No. You conveniently disregard the part of the video. I don't disregard anything. What about the experiment where the small sphere magnet suspended by a string over the large disk magnet? It spins near the center pole of the magnet as if caught in a vortex. Well, if there was a vortex, don't you think that you or somebody else would make trillions and zillions of dollars making money off the energy produced by a magnet? Because then energies would have energy. Then magnets would have energy because they could spin things. The only spin energy can only be created by moving the magnet through the magnetic field. So when you move the magnet, it has mass, and you can cause it to gain angular momentum or spin, okay, because it's changing which magnetic field it's in. The field lines are going in the opposite direction. And you can't see that when that happens, the magnet has to turn around. The south pole is here, and I go over here. I have to spin around to be the right orientation over here. You don't see how that has to spin? And that it has mass, and when you're moving something with mass, with a velocity, it gains momentum. And that momentum means it will keep spinning if it's easier to go forward than it is to go all the way back. You could sort of understand that once you get something spinning, it likes to stay spinning in that direction. And any agitation to that system would just increase its spin, not detract from its spin. But you can't make energy. There's no vortex coming out of the magnet. Einstein. Shit. It spins caught in a vortex. What about the cheap homemade homopolar motors made with a magnet? And again, they do what? That's fascinating. Absolutely nothing. There's no new magnetic science here. Okay, there's only parlor tricks. A piece of copper wire and a battery, and you don't understand why that happens. You don't understand that moving electricity through a conductor will create magnetism. You don't know that? There's no question to me that the magnetic field is in motion. Okay, so there's no question. You're convinced by experiments a grade school science student who paid any attention could debunk for you, could explain why no, there's no vortex in the magnet that you can tap and make things move with. The only movement has to come from some source of energy. The magnet doesn't produce any. It merely filters energy. It doesn't produce any. Alright. It's not static lines of force, as you say. So he said that in capital letters. Not static lines of force, as you say. They're not lines of force. They're rays of force, factually. just saying. What makes things line up on force lines, why the iron filings line up in a particular place, is because of the fact that they, like galaxies or something else, the arms of a galaxy, it's not because they hate each other. It's not for any rational reason. It's just that once they start collecting, then they create a magnetic field. You get it? And their magnetic field is, again, repulsive and attractive by certain rules, and those rules mean that you can't have two lines right next to each other. So the stronger the field, the fact is the lines can't be too close to each other because they just become one line. Get it? Probably not, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, but there are no real lines of force. There's no place in space that says here's where the line's going to be. It depends on what lines up on the lines. Okay, pretty much. Okay, so moving on, we'll do this two-slit stuff. Okay, so this wave versus particle and ether versus material, I guess you could say. So wave space versus hard space. Now, I've made the argument in lots of ways that if you look at the big universe, maybe this is one of those circumstantial pieces of evidence, not hard evidence, but you look at the big universe and what's it doing? There's no sign of waving going on. There's signs of clumping going on. Stuff clumps together. And you have areas that have lots of clumpy stuff and areas where there's very little clumping stuff. And but it's stuff. And it's not wave stuff. It's bit stuff. It's granular. You break it in half, you break it in half, you break it in half, break it in half. It all kind of does break down. And, you know, going a step further, we kind of know that, yes, on the elemental level you have molecules, that is atoms that have an attraction to each other, and then you have the bits inside the atoms, which means the atoms have a certain attraction. So molecularly there's a structure, atomically there's a structure, and those things will, those forces, that tension, depending on the configuration of those molecules, can mean that the molecules slide across each other, or that the molecules are very rigid and can't move at all. That kind of stuff. Alright, but anyway, there's no real indication of anything like waves. Second argument is, what are waves but a frequency of incidence? So, if I'm going to create sustained waves in something, I usually going to need to keep poking it. I poke it, and there's a vibration. The sound is probably a better example because the atmosphere doesn't do the rebound thing that water does. Water can create a lot of waves from one action because of its gigantic elasticity. It'll keep vibrating after you're done vibrating it, so to speak. It will take, because you move such a volume, the volume moves, the equal but opposite reaction happens, and it just keeps doing it for you, even though you stop doing it, like a spring. So it has to dampen, and so it'll continue to create waves that just get weaker and weaker and weaker. The atmosphere that sound travels through doesn't really do that, so you don't have as much of that problem. Alright, but yes, and so the general idea is that instead of saying, okay, something actually releases something, it throws it when it vibrates. It throws something off of it, shakes it off. Your theory is that it agitates a medium. The medium, that agitation travels through the medium as pressure waves, and that, you know, thickness waves, however you want to describe it. If I move this in water, I'll push the water, make it thicker on one side. You know, you can sort of get that that's all it is a thickness in the water. Alright, and so there's some evidence of frequency being significant. Not necessarily waves, just the idea that stuff moving at a frequency is significant. So I've pointed that out, that many things have a tipping point. You can't tip them over, you get like a tsunami or something. If just one wave comes, it might bounce back. But if there's two waves, it'll tip over. You know, weaker waves. And frequency is just very important in terms of the fact that many things have tension and they'll return to their steady state if given time. But if you hit them quickly, push and then push, you can knock them over with less force. Obviously you need enough force to do the job of knocking them over. I just mean that the force in a certain form will get the job done. The force applied too slowly won't get the job done. So obviously things that come quicker have the appearance of more force, but they don't really. Because their velocity is always counted as just c. But c is a time equation. You see, c happens in a period of time. And so the time factor means is a volume factor in a sense. So if I say 2 seconds of ultraviolet light, it's 2 seconds of ultraviolet light, which means the light's on for 2 seconds. Which means that there's lots of vibrations, lots of peaks, lots of tons in that amount of light. Where if it's 2 seconds of infrared, there's not as many tons, actual tons, in the light. That's why it's weaker. It's because it's on for the entire time part of the equation. But if you just counted the tons, they're equally strong. Obviously, if you expose something to more of something, if you shoot it with more bullets, it'll end up more likely dead. You know. Okay. Alright, so his other video, you did the 2-slit thing. And it's the same old, a lot of it, the same old jive that we've been over and over and over again. But it's just all these miscarriages. He makes these little mistakes. They're not a big deal, but they are all over the place. In this video, he's going to talk about the light slowing down when it goes through glass. And he says 17%, but it's 40%. Little stuff like that. But anyway, alright, so he was talking about doing the single needle as a double slit experiment. As a single slit experiment, if you want to call it, to be more exact. And then it makes the same pattern as the double slit. Well, it does make the same pattern. That's not true. Okay, so let's understand what patterns we get. This pattern, that is the pattern that has 2 frequencies in it, that's the double slit pattern, traditionally known as. This pattern, just a double bar in the center and then a bunch of bars, that's produced by single slits or needles. And a bunch of dots separated by a great deal of distance, like 100 times there. So imagine this drawn to scale would be, the distance between these dots would be 100 times as thick as the dot. So it would be a dot, then 100 bits of empty space, a dot, 100 bits of empty space, a dot, blah, blah, blah. And that's created by a diffraction grating, which is just a lot of needles or a lot of double slits, essentially. Just close these off and you are creating a diffraction grating. So we have very different patterns. Now they'll keep comparing these to water, and they don't really do the same thing in water. So the wave appearance, the connection to, say, water waves, is only incidental, because you just have to look at the experiment done with different circumstances to see light and water behave nothing like each other. No similarity, where waviness doesn't play a factor. Okay, so we have the single impediment, which doesn't work great in water waves because the water has a tendency just to reconnect over little obstacles. So the straight waves go in, and you're probably going to get pretty close to straight waves coming out. You'll get some pattern, but there's not going to be much. You're not going to break it into 2 waves. You're going to break it into 2. It won't be a very good pattern, where the needle produces a very good pattern in light. So it's not completely dissimilar, but not too close. The single slit, nothing in common at all. So you use undiffracted, light without interference as the source, that is plane waves as a source. You'll get just a plane wave coming out, and you'll have no interference, peaks or valleys at all. No indication of anything similar whatsoever between light and the single aperture and water in a single aperture. No similarities. So what I have argued is these are really just surfaces. So this is the 2 surface. The single slit is the 2 surface experiment. Well, anyway, So then you go to the double slit. This is where you create the traditional two waves. So Huygens says, I'll fake these two waves in light. So I'll make two waves like this that will interfere with each other. So they fake it. They just make it up. They force two waves to come out of that single opening, which it doesn't do in water. And here they have the obvious. Now all of a sudden Huygens is applied differently, and now we don't have two waves in each one of these slits. We only have one. So they just annihilate the use of Huygens and just let these two waves interfere with each other. And that's what their math is doing. Their math is creating this model. So in the single slit, the model just takes the center point, makes two waves that interfere with each other. In the double slit, the math takes the double slits, doesn't make four waves, just makes two, and has them interfere with each other. And in this experiment, I don't know what exactly they do, because I don't think they have a rational Huygens explanation. But certainly in water, it's not going to work. Diffraction gradients don't work in water, as far as I know. No chance that you'll get huge up and down peaks, and then absolutely nothing for 100 times the space, and then a huge gigantic peak, and then nothing. So no similarity at all. So I'm just saying that, so you have little similarity, no similarity, similarity, no similarity. So most of the time you have no similarity, and yet they persist in arguing it's just like waves in water. It's not just like it at all. It's only a little bit like it under one ideal circumstance, and in every other circumstance it's not much like it at all. Alright, so we can't see photons. We can only see how they affect things like electrons. This guy says electrons don't exist. Well, he says everything doesn't exist. So even if you saw a wave on the ocean, and you said, look at that wave coming in, he'd correct you and say, you can't say that. You can't say a wave is a something. You have to say, look at that perturbation of water coming. Look at that perturbation of a big pile of ether or something. You can't call it something because of his strict vocabulary that I'm sure he never applies in his own life. It's just something he uses when he's being a complete bullshit artist to entertain the absolute morons who watch his videos. So at least we know that, Canon, Nikon, Fuji, all these companies should be arrested for molesting retards, because that's what it comes down to. Clearly, photographers are the dumbest cunts on earth. I'm sorry to use that language, but geez, it just came out of my mouth. Because they reward this idiot for saying absolutely ludicrous crap. So all those companies should be sued for molesting retards. Because obviously photographers are retarded as a class. Grotesquely retarded. They'll fall for anything. And, these companies are just stealing their money. Quite obviously. But these people are just so stupid. Stupid, retarded, stupid, moronic, idiot. I mean, just no clue at all. So anyway, let's play this slop. So what else do I want to bring up about the problems they haven't resolved? Well, I just sort of wanted to get them all in this one video and then blah, blah, blah. So we do have these three patterns, which have to be acknowledged, that the patterns are very different. And also the fact that, as you make the slit smaller, the pattern gets less wide. Widen the slit, the pattern gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And what it's really doing is it's getting thicker and thicker and thicker as you narrow the slit. You're not making a different pattern, you're just making the existing pattern much thicker. So with a very narrow slit, this center thing gets this big, and this one right next to it gets, this big. And so that's all you're doing, is magnifying this. Alright. Projecting it at a wider angle as the slit gets narrower. Bending it more. Alright. Okay, let's play this. Horrible video.
What if we applied a long, long lost, totally dead 3,000 plus year old, probably older than that, early Pythagorean, ancient Egyptian.
Okay, ancient Egyptian method of logic. I think he's going to say that. Platonic logic, he calls it. All right, now, as I tried to point out to people, it's just a rational exercise. If you think about the subject of logic for a little while, and you try to find logic, what you'll realize is there is no such thing as logic. There's no logic ether. There's nothing that makes something logical except the facts themselves. The things you're combining do the logic. If you say something is black, then you've essentially said it's not whiter than it is black. There's certain things you say as soon as you say something as a fact. And those facts, when you combine 2 or 3 or 4 of them, do the logic for you. They already tell you where they're compatible with each other. Like going this way, they're all compatible. They all have a component in this direction, kind of a thing. And as soon as one has a component going the wrong way, that can't be the right way. You get it? Logic only lets you go where the consensus goes. And if there's not a consensus, you have to go somewhere else. Law of non-contradiction. But the facts do the logic. There's no function of logic. There's no equation of logic. The facts are the equation. It's just adding them. There's no multiplication, there's no division, there's no square root of, there's no to the power of. No, none of that. You just add them. You add the facts.
Methodologies of figuring out things called retroduction.
Yes, retroduction. Well, who cares what it's called? And I'm sure it wasn't called that 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago. So that sounds kind of bogus. Why don't you tell us what what it was really called?
There's only like an article and a half on this in the entire world. I'll be writing a book on it eventually.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Write a book about something nobody could give a damn about. Very good idea.
In the future. But what if we actually apply hardcore Pythagorean and Platonic retroduction?
And again, retroduction. He's implying that it's saying something. Where if I could dig up Plato and bring him to this world, he'd say, oh shit, I was pretty stupid doing that whole earth, wind, fire thing. Yeah, that was kind of lame. Yeah, it's a lot more complicated, ain't it? Yeah, it is.
To explaining light. Now, from the premise of the simplex mind, obviously light exists, right? But then we...
yeah, well, you say that. Obviously, light exists. So yes, why don't you just let us say that we understand that it comes in a quantity. And there are these, the quantity has a certain amount of energy. And these are things that just can't be denied. So whether it's a hunk of ether, moving through the ether, okay, it's bent ether now because it has a wave in it, okay, so that's the theory. It's a piece of bent ether when it's moving somewhere. So if a photon is right there, right here in space, it's created a bend in the ether, little S shape, going this way and going this way, all right, but it's a thing. There's no point in not calling it a something. It's something. It's identifiable from ether without a bend in it. When there's no photon in the ether, it's different than when there is one in the ether. So why play this game? Why pretend there's no photons?
You have to define, is light a thing in and of itself? If we only knew about Bob, or could define Bob, when he was walking or he was moving something, or let's say Bob could have farted, right? We only then can say something about Bob. And by the way, the 4 Maxwellian field equations never define a field in principle, a field in itself, of itself, by itself. Maxwellian field equations.
And again, that wasn't the obligation or the intent of the field equations. The field equations were merely to resolve the how to formalize the relationship between the movement of a magnet and the movement of electrons in a conductor. I mean, that was the purpose. The mechanism that transfers the energy was a mystery. Maxwell believed in ether, but he couldn't prove it. So but he could prove the formatic relationship, and he could point out that depending on the configuration, depending on how you're spreading the magnetism, okay, you can have inverse square law apply, twice, 4 times the force or twice the force. Or the force can be infinite if you have an infinite plane.
is only define field modalities, whether that be magnetic, electric, dielectric, of a vector over a period of time with result and reflex. No.
Yeah, so a vector over a period of time, result and reflex. He did more than that. But regardless, the point is that there was a relationship between the material things, the bigger things moving, the bigger clumps of ether move. They radiate little clumps of ether. The little clumps hit big pieces of ether again and move them in a similar manner to they moved in the big clumps. So you move big clumps, it travels the energy through little clumps, and then ends up in the other location. But I'm just saying, what's the difference? I can take, if I put the ether here, I take the ether away. What's the difference? It's a clump in the ether. You don't get that? You don't get that the photon is a disturbance in the ether that takes up a certain amount of space and time?
No branch of science has ever, at any point in time, defined a field.
Well, again, he keeps making these outrageous claims that he backs up with not one iota of evidence. There's no evidence that people won't give you lots of explanations for fields, especially, you know, tenured professors, so to speak. They'll give you an explanation. You just don't like their explanation, so don't pretend it doesn't exist. They'll explain it to you as Einstein explains bent space, which you should like. And I'll explain it to you in the real terms of, yes, they're obviously tons. Not virtual ones, real ones. That's right, the same ones that are gravity that are pushing you onto the Earth. Shit.
By the way, if you ever really want to piss off a scientist, or
same lines. He keeps using the same lines over and over and over. The same fucking jokes in each fucking show. This isn't like, I'm not in Wyoming now. You're not talking to a new audience. These are the same fucking people in each video, idiot. You can't say exactly the same fucking shit. You have to at least say a different, put a couple of different verbs in or something. I mean, reading exactly the same script is fucking insulting as hell to your audience, bimbo.
Physicists, the only thing you have to do is you need to ask them something really simple like a child, because they'll have a brain fart. They'll either get pissed or walk away, or they will try to blow smoke up your skirt. Just ask them, say, "Excuse me, Mr. Scientist, Mr. Know-It-all."
Same shtick. Excuse me. Did that the same exact shit in the other video. Same shit. Same fucking show.
Oh, asshole. And if I ask you a question about light, sure, I know everything about light. I am a tenured professor of physics, or astrophysics, whatever the case may be. Astrophysicists are really good.
I mean, his redundancies are just, I mean, you know, they should be legendary on YouTube. Nobody is more redundant than this fucker. But I mean, to do this whole redundant story all over again. Let me tell you a new story. It's about this chick, Red Riding Hood. I mean, it's preposterous. He just keeps saying the same shit. And it is absolute shit. Steaming, frickin' lying shit.
Well, because these people are always looking at life, but they don't know what life is.
None of this ever happened. He never talked to a physicist of any kind, ever. I mean, he's just a liar. This never happened.
Said, excuse me, since light slows down by about 17%.
Well, you got the number wrong, okay? The refractive index of glass is 1.4 something, the average piece of glass. Crappy glass, 1.3 something. Really heavy lead glass, 1.5 maybe. So it's 40 to 50%, shithead.
Depending on the frequency of light, because the higher the frequency, the more the capacitance, and the more it slows down. This is why...
No, that's not true either. The higher the frequency, the more the light is diffracted, which means it will likely travel further through the glass. It won't go the straight path, it'll go the bent path, which means it'll be the longer path. Shit.
Blue light slows down more.
Yeah, the light doesn't slow down. You know they have explanations. Now the explanations involve a simple concept of, let's say, light's a regular sized bowling ball, and there's a giant 500-pound steel ball, and then there's a bowling ball on the other side of the steel ball, and you you roll your bowling ball at a steady speed, and and you have two of them. One that will just roll plain, and one that has to hit the steel ball, and then it goes back into bowling ball, and then hits the steel ball, and then bounces. So one of them has to go through electrons. One doesn't. And that's where things get slowed down, is because of what the conversion from bowling ball nudge to the actual steel ball, slowing it down 1 million times, because the steel ball is made out of 1 million bowling balls, and all of them have to move, and they move a tiny, tiny amount, and that pushes the next bowling ball. But it takes time to move 1 million bowling balls. So the light really traveled a lot more distance because it had to hit each one of the little bowling balls inside the inside the heavy one, if you get my drift. So the explanation will always be something like that electrons are slowing the light down, in the sense that electrons force the light to travel through more energy pathways to complete their journey through the transparent medium. Alright, the light doesn't fly right through glass. It has to fly through the atoms that make up the glass, and more specifically likely the electrons that make up the glass. And so the other explanation could be even more simple, in the sense that the photon going in has to travel, it reflects through the matrix of the electrons. So they're like in a hexagon, and if you hit one here, you go this way, and then you go that way, and then you go this way, and then you go that way. So they're traveling a longer path because they have to reflect off the electrons. And the electrons never release them at the same angle. It's always a precise angle, but it's not the same angle in, angle out. That's not how electrons play. Electrons play angle in, a little bit different angle out. And so if you have to hit 3 or 4 of them before you get the same angle back again. Alright, but that's what's slowing the photon down. The photon doesn't slow down, it just has to go through an obstacle course. And I think any one of these imbeciles of your fans could understand that that's what matter is. It's an obstacle course. And that's why there's things that are transparent and things that are opaque. Is sometimes the obstacle course has a rigid, repeatable pattern, so then the jig-jags end up being even at the end. So it comes out exactly the same way at the other end because it's all even because of the geometry. And that some physical structures would have an uneven geometry in their atoms, and that means it gets scattered all over the place and comes out as heat. You can understand that, can't you? Perfectly valid, lucid, factually reasonable. It doesn't create facts going the wrong way, that explanation. There's no fact going inconsistent with that explanation. It's a perfectly reasonable explanation for why it appears that light slows down. It doesn't. It just travels a longer path. It takes it longer to get through the medium. Fuck. You don't understand the difference in speeds of mediums?
In glass, for example, than does red light. Excuse me, without breaking the law of conservation of energy, how is it the case, and this is irrefutable, every scientist on Earth will accept this fact, light slows down about 17% as it goes through glass, but as it...
Well, again, the light itself doesn't slow down. So again, every physicist that I ever heard understands that. I've never heard a degreed physicist actually argue that light slows down, that the actual photons lose their speed of light character and slow down to go through the medium. I've never heard any physicist say that. So this whole bogus argument that physicists say this is a lie, because I haven't seen one say that.
Leaves glass, it, quote, speeds back up.
Well, again, quoting who? Quoting who it speeds back up. Who are you quoting? You're not quoting any physicist I ever heard who says, yes, the photon went slower, and then it puts it back in 5th gear and goes faster. None of them would explain it that way. None of them.
To its original speed. This is a fact. Now, without breaking, Mr. Scientist, Mr. Know-It-All Asshole, without breaking the...
So again, just recognize, know-it-all asshole. So he uses plenty of disrespectful, raggy rhetoric. So all these assholes who think, oh, Ken is just a sensitive soul and he can't deal with controversy. No, he's a coward. He's a liar and a coward.
Law, because it's not like a light is not like a car, where like hits a speed bump and then you slow down and you hit the gap.
Right, and none of the physicists will say that's what it is either, idiot. What they'll say is light's like anything else. If you have to take a detour, it's more mileage and you won't get at the destination in the same amount of time. That's right, you take a longer path to get somewhere, even though you're traveling at the same speed, 40 miles an hour, but the road is 4 miles longer, it'll take you longer to get to the destination. That's right. That's what they'll tell you, Ken.
Gas again to speed back up because there's no gas. And by the way, this all proves the ether, by the way. Anybody...
So now this one thing proves the ether. The fact that it can be theoretically speculated that light is traveling through a matrix when it travels through matter. It's traveling through a grid work, and that it might not travel a perfectly straight path. That reasonable statement being so preposterous, that is so insane an explanation, that proves there must be the God ether. No, it doesn't, Ken. That's not a proper definition of proof. I don't even think the Platonic people who were still shitting in the street, little channels in the road, sort of road, little channel in the mud full of poo. Yeah, the people still living that way weren't even dumb enough to say something that stupid. They knew that wasn't proof, Ken.
Thinks I can disprove the ether is a moron, and I will destroy them in any debate.
Okay, I will destroy them in any debate. So again, no evidence that he was ever accepted a debate challenge in his life. That he had every evidence is that he has run away from every single one ever provided him. Certainly I have solid evidence that I have repeatedly politely asked him for the opportunity to debate him, and he blocked me for politely asking for the opportunity. I didn't call him fat ass. I didn't say baldy loony. I didn't say a single derogatory motherfucking thing to the cunt, and he blocked me for asking for the opportunity to debate him. So at least we have that evidence, and I'm sure, just from seeing the other people who've been blocked, that they probably did the same thing. They said, I'll debate you, Ken, and they got blocked for it. He's a fucking flaming coward, and he has no right to talk about his victories when he has displayed nothing but cowardice. I mean, he's like some fake soldier who hid behind the latrine through the whole fucking war, and then he pops out saying how, look at me, I'm the great victor in the war. You're a cunt. A flapping, skanky cunt.
Right, on field theory. Without breaking the law of conservation of energy, how can light steep?
So again, there's not even a wobble in the law of conservation, obviously in the results, because yes, it does come out going the same speed anyway, but realistically, we can see the conservation impact in the sense that most mediums will get hot. Most of them won't transmit light perfectly. Most of them do have noise built into their system, and you'll see evidence of that. No breaking of conservation.
Speed back up. By the way, light has no speed. It's a rate of induction. There's no such thing as a...
Okay, there's no such thing as a photon. There's no such thing as light. It's just an induction. So again, if you see a wave on the ocean, you can't say, look at the wave. You have to say, look at the induction. And that's his proper way of talking now. Everything's an induction. Human beings are inductions. Everything is some sort of wave knot. Whatever that means. Some sort of overly compressed, multi-compressed, hyperborealoid, strangled wave thingy. Yeah, sure it is.
Speed of light. It's a rate of induction. Everything in the universe is electrical. Specifically, it's dielectric.
Electrical, which there is no, frankly, electrical. So, I mean, electrical is sort of a misnomer. Electrical is just the movement of electrons. There's nothing electrical as a force. It's magnetic. So everything, see, he said it before, everything's magnetism. Then he was right. When he just said everything's electrical, now he's wrong. I mean, this is how, he hasn't even thought through his own philosophy. He writes a book on magnetism, and then he makes a video saying everything's electrical. You see the stupidity of this? When he knows that, no, everything's magnetic, and he just completely misspoke here. Because he doesn't even believe his own bullshit. He believes in the magnet god. He doesn't believe in the electric god. Electric is a symptom of magnetism. That's all it is. There is no electrical. It's just, I mean, it's a force.
Magnetic. Okay. Without breaking the law of conservation of energy, how can light speed back up again? Because it has no...
So again, he just keeps making the same straw man argument as this somebody says light actually slows down and then light actually speeds up, which, like I said, no physicist would argue that's what happens. So it's a fake argument. He's never had the argument with a real human being. He's never won the argument with a real human being. And so he just keeps prancing around, claiming a victory, and he never fought in a fight.
Energy by which to, speed back up. They will never have an answer.
No, that was convenient. Thank you, YouTube.
Hey guys, I'm Carly Kloss.
I'm not doing the ad again. Fuck you. Who the fuck is Carly Kloss anyway? Fuck you, bitch. Okay, yes, you're attractive, but fuck you. Commercials. Get a real job, commercials. Fuck you. I made my own website for $500,000. Yes, I got paid $500,000 to make my own website. Fuck you. And her fucking little Apple shit. Fuck you. Bitch. Skanky sellout. Fuck. What, you couldn't marry a rich producer to make some money? What the fuck, you stupid whore. Oh, God. When people will sell out, they just get on... I'll lie for money. Sure. Fuck you. It's got 3 digital cameras. It's not even her house. What the fuck? Fake, phony, fraud. Phony, fake, stinky, lie human. Scuzz human. Lie, lie, lie. Bitch, I like to give her a spanking. Hates pretty people. They're scum. Too often, generally speaking. Alright, well anyway, Ken's video just goes on and on and on, same bullshit over and over and over. He's made some new one where he's actually drawing pictures, so I'll probably have to watch that, because that's got to be hilarious. Oh, we do that now. I'm probably going to have that same fucking commercial on it, though. Maybe. Oh, no commercial yet.
About light. Anybody that's interested in photography will find this of interest as well.
Oh, sure.
Let's first start off with some fundamental principles of light. Light has 66% of the speed going through glass. However, light is not a speed.
Oh, 66%. So now he's got the number right, 34%. And it depends on the glass. And again, most prisms are made out of leaded glass. So the number's a little different for a prism. So, whatever. So yeah, at least he's, How come it's not still 17%, Ken? And this whole EHV, you see, this is where this goes all wrong. Okay? It's because these constants are timed. They're timed. So it assumes the same amount of time of exposure of light. So obviously, if you're a runner and your stride is 10 feet, let's say, and the other runner's stride is 5 feet, in the same amount of time, okay, you're gonna, no, because distance is time, you're both going the same speed, he's gonna run, he's gonna have more steps than you're gonna have in the same amount of time. And if we counted the steps as energy, then you could say They have uneven energy because the steps are different. You get my point. I probably said that wrong, but the point is that if you're using time as the control, then you're letting more blue light in, more blue tons get through the opening. If you open the opening the same amount of time for both kinds of light, of course more blue light gets through because they're packed closer together. There's more cars on the train. The cars are only 5 feet long, and on the other train they're 15 feet long. You can understand that in the same amount of time, more cars can get through if it's blue light. Doesn't mean blue light's stronger. It means you let more cars through. The fact is, blue light is more effective in fucking with electrons. It just means they're more sensitive, just like you're more sensitive to certain shapes. Arrows will puncture your skin. There's certain rules about what will affect you more, and it's not just about how heavy something is. I can throw rocks at you that are all 10 ounces. The pointy ones are going to matter, though. The not pointy ones won't. That kind of thing. So come on. Don't be fooled by this jargon. Alright, anyway, enough of the video. I mean, you really don't want to hear this, do you? Let's see how much time we have.
It's a rate of induction. Through vacuum, light is 186,000 miles per second. Of course, it's not a speed, it's a rate of induction.
Rate of induction.
About 124,000.
Now, what exactly would be the difference between a rate of induction and a speed if the rate of induction is in an ether that's, by classical definition, evenly spread? The ether is this even thing in the 3 dimensions. It's an even plane of muck. So the rate of induction is the same no matter where you go in the ether field. So why would you make a distinction? It's the speed with which a clump of ether moves through the ether. That's what it is. I would like his explanation on how something actually moves faster than the photon clump, because that would be interesting. How you have a clump that transmits its whatever faster than the rate of induction of photon clump. He keeps indicating that there might be such a thing, but he never explains where it comes from, or how it's made, or where it is in the universe.
Miles per second going through glass. No variation on that, which the index of refraction has to do with the composition of the glass. This is like the reason why radioactive stuff is actually added, like thorium doping, to older lenses. It actually changes the refractive index. Well, the same refractive index doesn't mean anything. It actually pertains to how...
It doesn't mean anything except how much the light's going to scatter. Well, gee, yeah, that doesn't mean anything. Oh, wait a minute. That sort of does mean something, doesn't it? Yeah, it does.
It actually bends the light itself. So, why would it be the case that blue light is refracted through a prism much more than red light? Here we have the actual angle of deflection or angle of refraction. A red light, green light, and blue light. Why would that be the case? Let's take a look at the spatial footprint of red light, for example. Okay.
That's not a spatial footprint of any kind, this mush. So, and again, it's the one wave's going this way, the other wave's going this way. All right, magnetic and electric. But there is no such thing. It's all absolute nonsense. Go show me a photon being affected by magnetism. Go find an electric photon. Go find one. Yeah, go find an electric first. You won't find an electric, and you won't find a photon bothered by it.
Anyway. Conventional thinking, a human being thinks that a larger box can contain more stuff. So here we have a larger spatial footprint of red in frequency light. So why is this actually deflected less through red light than blue frequency light? Because blue frequency light...
Yeah, these almost look like fishes now. That's part of my theory. Anyway, yeah. I'll play a little more.
Actually has...
Yeah, how does that explain anything, Ken? So he just draws it again. I mean, what's the point? Spatial footprint, he calls it. So all he's saying is it's a higher frequency. Yes, red light is is twice the frequency in terms of the wavelength of it. So that's the other thing. You know, when they talk about this stuff, it's kind of irritating because they changed it to the length of the wave rather than the hertz number of frequency. So, you know, you have this inverted number which makes you think like 800 sounds like more of something than 400. But 400's the strong, you know, 400 is the stronger wave length, is the more rapid wavelength. You know, and it's just so irritating because, you know, they don't want to use hertzes because obviously they have to get into like gigahertz or something. I don't know what the wavelength of light is in frequency. It would end up being something like a gigahertz or something. I don't know. It's really high. The frequency of blue light is really high. I don't know. Maybe somebody knows, but yeah, it's like it's more than a gigahertz, right? So it's got to be something after gigahertz.
Here we have light, as I told you before, and as I mentioned in my book, has a transverse E and M. Excuse me. Longitudinal pulse perturbation. These pulse perturbations, which are actually rarefactions and compressions,
yeah. Oh
how
shit!
it actually bends the light itself.
Oh,
so
damn! I want to go back to that. You drew that wrong.
So almost twice as much.
So he drew it incorrectly again.
And this is the case.
So look where he put the dots, right? He put one in the middle, then he puts one at the intersection, then he puts it in the intersection, then he puts it in the intersection. I mean, it's not even consistent logically. See, those are inconsistent facts. See, the logic does itself. The logic says same, 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 different. And says, whoops. Yeah, that doesn't, you didn't explain different. Explain different. Why is that different thing there? I can't do this logic until you explain the different thing here. Is that a mistake? What is that? And also what we do know is that if you were to tonize a photon, these intersection points aren't it's here and here. That's the wavelength. Anyway.
Look at the equation in the upper right hand.
There are no half a photon. See when he does this, say if we just forget this one, mistake. So just even doing this. If this were true, that there was some recognizable nodes, that this node was important, then there would be a half a photon. Somewhere in energy equations we'd be able to have photons, cut them in half, and collect halves, have 1.5 photon, or have a half a photon, or have 3.5 photons. Can't do that. So that's another reason why that logically doesn't work. See, I have another fact that's pretty secure that says there's no evidence of a half photon anywhere that I've ever seen. So I can't combine what you did with the other facts you're contending. They don't fit. See? That's called logic. The facts themselves are incompatible. All right, that's enough. So I guess I'll just have to insult his audience now. So all these people, these overweight, they tend to all be overweight, photographers, you're all fucking so fucking stupid. They're all fat. Yeah. Anyway, which is okay. I got nothing against, nothing personal. Can't say I have nothing against. I mean, I'm not a fatty chaser or anything like that. But this one's got an apple in her mouth or something. I don't know what the fuck that is. Anyway. You're all losers. You're just demonstrating. Like I said, I probably should file a lawsuit against Fuji and Nikon and Nikkor and all these companies and say, because it's clear you're just taking advantage. You're molesting retards. Complete fucking idiots. They'll fall for anything. And they're just duping the fuck out of you dumbasses. You camera pointers are the dumb. You want to find a dumb man on earth? Go find a guy with a camera, an expensive camera. That's a dumbo. So maybe that's the only way to do this. I mean, Ken doesn't, like, realistically, he doesn't play any of these 60 symbols videos. He doesn't play real physicists. He doesn't take on the real arguments. He's just such a friggin' blowhard. He just talks about how he's so great, and he proves nothing with anything called evidence. Shit.